and welcome back to another lesson of the Logos and Letters. My name is Liam, and this is the third lesson and episode of the Logic in the Bible. Here we are looking at the final analysis for this particular book. In the second book, there are three more analyses. The second book hasn't been released as of this date. It is the Friday 26th of June. I'm expecting that I'll have it fully edited by probably the end of August. I'm thinking about like the 31st of August is the deadline that I'm approaching. But without further ado, let's just conclude with the fact that it has, each book will have three of these analyses. And if they become popular, I'm happy to just write more, just for the sake of satisfying that. So we're going to conclude here, and we've looked at chapter 1, 2, and 1:1. So we're going to 1:3 sort of wraps up the first two. That's why 3 is kind of a satisfying place to end here. And we're going to have a look at this and see how it goes. You should know by now what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to achieve with these lessons. And if you're following the Logic series, that's excellent. I hope that you can see how the content that we're learning is being applied. And if you have any questions or where I've got any points from, just ask me and I'll happily share that with you. So analysis 3, Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3. He, being his glory's radiance and the stamp of his substance, bearing also all things via his utterance's power, in the highest he sat at the right hand of majesty, having made sins clean. So we start off with being his glory's radiance. We don't start off with he because we already know who we're talking about. The subject is the Son, okay? The Son is referred to as the radiance of his glory. Therefore, the radiance of the Father's glory is the Son. The glory and the radiance are spoken of as distinct things, yet they still constitute one thing. Almost paradoxical at that point, or contradictory at least. But I think by now, just by 1 and 2, you would already know how this works. But let's continue on. Such as how the heat and the brightness of the sun are sometimes spoken of differently, but they constitute the same thing. Thus, here we may conclude that the Son and the Father constitute the same thing, but are spoken of distinctly. Moreover, the Son is specifically the radiance. Radiance is perceivable. Perception is a relation between perceiver and the perceptible. You will know this from like chapter 7, perception, perceiver, perceptible, aesthesis, aestheton, aesthetikoi, or aesthetikos. Let's continue on. For creatures, a relation is an accident. Okay, we should know that too. It is a relation is a supreme genus. Therefore, if one could behold the radiance, we have an accident which comes from the Son. I know it's a bit of a play on words because I just mentioned Son up here as well. Son there, but obviously talking about that one. The accident is a particular knowledge which exists in the beholder. Alright? Particular knowledge which exists in the beholder. But also knowledge has the same relation as was stated here. Same logic, right? In the Logic series, you'll remember when we covered the idea of the knower knowing the knowable. Okay, so episteton, episteme, and you could say epistetikoi if you wanted to. Epistetikos. Let's continue on. Which exists in the beholder, for we perceive something and then know it either perfectly or imperfectly. We know it perfectly if we know what it is by knowing its cause and its effect. We know that the Son is the radiance of the Father's glory, and so can be spoken of as the visible representation of the Father. Right? But it still constitutes one and the same thing this whole time. Knowledge is also a relation between the knowable and the knower. Thus, by the perception of the radiance, which is the visible representation of the Father, we come to a knowledge of God. This is a particular accident also. Therefore, the Son is the cause of the relation between the Father and the people generally. I spoke about this in a lesson where I was trying to explain very quickly in a few minutes how God has no accidents, yet shares the accident of relation with us. Why? Because Jesus is claimed to be not just God entirely, but 100% man and 100% God in perfect harmony. So that is how he can do that, because the particular accident is established by the perception of the radiance. And who is the radiance? The Son, right? So therefore the Son is the cause of the relation between the Father and the people generally. And so the Son is a pontifex, that is to say, a bridge builder. So pontifex in Latin means bridge builder, and it was also the title given to the highest religious station in the Roman Republic and early empire, between the people and God. But here it also says being, right? Like a state of being, which is a reference to the state of a subject. Didn't mean to do that, my bad. State of a subject. Since God's nature and essence are one and the same, we must deduce that being is fixed and permanent and imprescindible from his identity. Imprescindible means like, so scindabile means cuttable and tearable. Imprescindible means cannot be cut away, cannot be torn away, cannot be separated at all. Okay? Imprescindible from his identity. In a word, the Son's existence is distinguishable by us as being this pontifex. Being this pontifex. This is not to claim that it is his raison d'être, his reason of being, but it is to claim that the role of pontifex is something which was determined before time began, and is a deliberate and providential event, which is not some kind of knee-jerk reaction. So I don't really need to explain this part too much, but this last part is important. He didn't become what he was and is and will be only because we sinned. It was always ordained. He always knew that like we would sin and go astray and all these sorts of things, and it was established before we even did those things. For if that were the case, the Son would have existed as a pontifex because of our actions, and thus our actions would have power over God. That is something to always keep in mind. If that were the case, then the Son would have existed as a pontifex because of our actions, and thus our actions would have power over God. Alright? And the stamp of his substance. In addition to the description above, the Son is also said to be the stamp of his substance, to be impressed upon another material to the effect of leaving an image of the object impressed, is to stamp something. Alright, so I just clarify that. Alright, just clarify exactly what that is. And the Son is the impression left by the impressing of the Father's substance. Right, so you want to talk about the incarnation there, really, when it comes to perception-wise, and seeing that impression. In a wax stamp, the image of the impression and the wax itself are not distinct substances. They are one and the same. The ability to be distinguished comes about from the senses. The senses identify the image by perception. Therefore, the substance of the Son is one and the same with the substance of the Father, and the power of perception allows us to see the Son, the impressed image. All of this, which I'm speaking about right here, is further evidence and reasoning to support that, or just straight up logic and truth that to state that Jesus can be God. If you fully agree with the part where he's man and you're dubious about how he can be God as well, while being that man, this is the exact sort of reasoning that person would need to hear. For if the Father is spirit, he has no body to be perceived. By us, of course, by us. But if his Son, which is the same substance, has a body, then the wax and the glory, remember from the first part, can be perceived and known. By knowing these things through the Son, we can grow closer in relation with God, or we can distance ourselves from what is not God, but some false God. Right? So, not just can we get closer to the real God, but we can start to see or fully understand and come to terms with what are false gods. All right, so luxury cars might be a false god for some young men. Some young men might find that expensive designer clothes of some particular brand or some celebrity, that's their false god, that's what they worship. Or some older men might find that I don't know what older men would find as a false god. Maybe gambling, just from personal experience. I find that a lot of older men who retire take up gambling a lot. So that might become a false god that they worship, trying to get the best odds and things like that. So we can distance ourselves from that. But also literally, if someone claims that this thing is God as well, of course, that is how we distinguish too. I was just pointing out some more subtle ones as well. Finally, a stamp is never random. If the Son is a stamp of the substance of the Father, then the Son is the purposeful representation of what it means to be the Father. Purposeful representation of what it means to be the Father. All that the Father is the same as all that the Son is. So if the Father is one way in Genesis, his Son is the same way in John. If the Father shows mercy on Israel and scolds Israel, then the Son shows no mercy on Peter and scolds Peter. If the Father is wroth with his people in the tent of witness, for example, Numbers chapter 25, then the Son is wroth with the people in the temple. For example, John 2:13. And so, by being a distinguishable person, as the impression on a wax made by a stamp is distinguishable from the whole mass of the wax, and also the same substance of the Father, the Son is not to be considered in comparison with the Father as if they would they differ in anything, not even in their pedagogy or behavior. Right? So we talk about the angry old God of the Old Testament and the loving God of the New Testament. That's Chinese whispers, mate. That's just an old hacked repetition of something that's not true at all. If you go into the New Testament and you don't think that God is as strict as the God of the Old Testament, you haven't been reading closely enough at all. Jesus talks about people going to hell, and lots of people going to hell all the time. Throughout all four Gospels have him talking about people going to hell. Revelation is about a whole group of people being condemned. So let's not pretend that they're not the same. They are. It's the same God throughout the whole thing. Their way they express their pedagogy and their governance might be a little bit different, less Machiavellian in a way. However, it's clearly the same God. So let me continue. Bearing all things in his utterance's power. It was demonstrated that the Son and the Father are of the same substance. Right, chapter 5. And thus, when he bears all things via his utterance's power, the subject in question is doing so as God would do so. Of course, because the subject was proven to be God as well. If the Father is omnipotent, the Son is omnipotent. He bears all things via his utterance's power. Thus, an utterance is a form of speech. Speech for God was demonstrated to be eternal and continuous, right? Part 1 and part 2. Speech for God was also demonstrated to be consubstantial with him. Thus, since he uses this speech to bear all things are being borne by an omnipotent power and eternally. Right? See how I'm stacking my facts from the first one, second one, I'm using them, I'm building up. I never abandon any points or conclusions that I make. I don't want to say recycle. That has a stigma of garbage about it, but I definitely reuse and I reapply. Yet it is specifically the Son who does the bearing, which is acting, and thus the Son is acting in order to bear all things. All things is the cosmos, thus the Son sustains the cosmos. The Son existed before time began, and so the cosmos was going to be sustained before time began. Right? So it's not our influence which makes him sustain the cosmos, because then we would have power over God. In light of this, the cosmos is not sustained on account of this or that choice which an individual man takes, or man as a whole. For if it were on account of what mankind did, then our actions have power over God. Moreover, by sustaining the cosmos by an eternal word, the world is older than what it. The word is older than what it sustains. Okay. If that is the case, then the cosmos was not made out of necessity. If it were made by necessity, it would be a cause of the word, right? And I've lowercased that W because it's not God anymore. In this situation, it wouldn't be God anymore, so it's lowercase w. Then the universe would be a cause of God, and the universe would be God. But God sustains the universe, thus the universe is not God, and all things are not God. All things can only be false gods. Okay? I've just done an attack on sort of like creation, environmentalists who worship the earth and animals and spirits and stuff. I apologize for that. I was just following the logic, and that's the truth of it. Controversial, I know, but if the truth says it's so, then it's so. All right. In the highest, I might pause it here and do part 2, because we've got in the highest, he sat, and at the right hand, and of majesty, having made sins clean. The reason why this one is longer is because I'm stacking all of the facts that I've produced in the first and second one, okay? And just like a mountain, if you add a pile upon a pile, soon you'll have a mountain. So that is part 1 of 1.3. Now, if it's not as entertaining as news and drama and all those other things, I get it. However, if you find it educational, that's all that matters to me. If you find it interesting, that's all that matters to me. Interesting and educational, that's the purpose of those analysis. And just to show you what you're capable of. If you want further help with doing these yourself, please message me and I'll happily talk to you about that. As always, semper fortis and opere. My name is Liam, and I'll see you next time.